Unbelievable, Wardy. Yes, less said about the better. No doubt people will be hurrying along to find out what's in the Our Daily Star this morning. We're going to discuss more serious matters with Ali Martin of The Guardian, Will Macpherson of The Telegraph, and Nass. Ali, I've looked through the papers. It kind of difficult day for cricket in a way, with the Lions and the Lionesses dominating a lot of news. Cricket feels though it's a little bit squeezed. Is that because of Lions and Lionesses, or just that it was a pretty slow old day here after it looked like England might charge to victory?
I mean, it is always a balance for the people in the office to try and work out what to give, due space to. But it probably also reflects the day. I think at lunch, there was probably going to be an explosion of coverage for the cricket, just because of the match situation. As the day wore on, I imagine that may have come down a little bit. I'd expect tomorrow's newspapers to be chock full of it, because we're looking at a great finish here.
Squeezed to the point where I didn't see you in print this morning.
No, it was too much Ben Stokes already in the Telegraph. Get rid of Macpherson.
You mentioned that. I will talk about Ben, because that's been the big story of the game, really. But if you talk to people in India, they say that when Virat Kohli played a Test match, ratings would go up. If you spoke to sports editors of 30, 40 years ago, maybe when Flintoff and prior to that, both of them were back page headlines, that it would sell more papers. Is there a correlation between writing about Ben Stokes and selling newspapers?
I think Ali would know this as well, and you would in your role at the Times. We have a better understanding of our readers than we probably ever have before, and we know what people like to read about. And generally, it's almost always a Ben Stokes story, because he can. Sometimes on a first or second day of a Test match, it can be quite slow going. England might be bowling, there might not be too many wickets to share around, but Stokes always finds a way to get the crucial one, and he can. You can almost always find a way to make him that story. And he's had a better all-round Test match here than he kind of ever has before, statistically. And his involvement today is basically the key element of the day, isn't it?
Well, he's all over the papers, of course. That's the headline in the Daily Mail this morning. Superhuman Stokes defies pain to give England a shot. Ali, I mean, he was the story yesterday for all kinds of reasons. One, the 100 in the morning, which was his first for a couple of years. But then he becomes the story even when he's not doing anything, because we're all worried about the state of his body. I think Nick Holt in Telegraph said it's a bit like looking at Compton's knee, way back in the 40s, and Beckham's metatarsal, body there that we're always slightly fingers crossed about.
Yeah, the entire sort of Test match is sort of being played out in his image, isn't it? And I think when you look at what he's achieved in this Test match, first for the ball, that first 5-wicket haul for, 7 years, 8 years, and then his first 100 for 2 years, and the first England captain to combine the two in a Test match, but then for his fitness to now become an issue. The only problem with Ben Stokes is that when you kind of write him off on day one physically, we had that at Lords, he got that groin niggle, and we thought, what does that do? Yeah. By the end of the Test match, he's bowling 19 overs across 2 spells. So, you're a bit of a hostage to fortune when you write about Stokes' fitness, but it does seem to be massive today.
And Will, he's been the story of the summer, really, this kind of rejuvenation and renaissance of him as an all-rounder. I mean, it seems from his own state of mind, state of being, that he's just a much better, more effective cricketer when he feels he can contribute in an all-round way.
Absolutely, and it's extraordinary that he's got himself back to this state of fitness at 34, and actually the fact that he didn't bowl yesterday afternoon, I wonder whether that is part of a bit of a maturation of himself, his own mindset, this team as well. The team is clearly maturing in the way they play their cricket. The third day here, after that blazing start with the bat, was just quite ruthless, wasn't it? But the way he took himself off the field on that third day, when he felt that he couldn't run the quick singles because of his cramp, and that's how England were playing the game at that point. And then to not bowl yesterday, I think he probably thought the rest of his attack could get more than 2 wickets. But I think what he was doing there was, just allowing his own body time to recharge. He's put a lot into this game, into this series as well. Whereas, for instance, at Lords, the game was on the line, and he felt the only person to be bowling at that point was him, so he bowled 2 epic spells. I think he is maturing a bit. I think previously, even as recently as December, we saw it, didn't we, when he overbowled himself and the hammy went again. I think he's learnt a bit from that, and I think the management have learnt a bit as well.
Simon Hughes in the Sunday Times talks about Stokes, talking about his credit to the surgeon who's turned indestructible skipper into the equal of both. I mean, he's picked up a little bit on something you did, Nass, about the technical changes that Stokes has made to get his bowling back to somewhere near his best. Do you want to just run the rule over those?
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to take credit for it, and it's going to be a bit boring for the viewer, but we now have Simon from Hawkeye, as you know, in our commentary box with us, and he'll be there working on things, and you'll look up at his monitor, and you'll see and he did a really good triple split screen, as we call it, about how Stokes has changed. There it is, from a braced in the 2019, then he was going through just before his injury when his body was falling apart, and you can tell what effect that has on his action and the angle there, not braced. Also lower in his action, so he's not getting as much skip and bounce and pace, and then he's gone back to brace. And we looked at the speeds, and his speeds have gone back past from 6 years ago. So, and obviously it's excellent to have Broady with us. Broady knows everything about bowling, just come out the dressing room, and he's been saying also just technical things. He's always been a great swinger of the ball, great reverse swinger of the ball, as we saw in Pakistan, at various places, South Africa, Cape Town. He spoke about that Cape Town spell before the Headingley Test. He went and watched that Cape Town spell in 2020. But Broady says he's also been working on a bit of a wobble seam. He's been talking to Jimmy Anderson about how to get it wobble, and that Shubman Gill dismissal was the classic wobble seam. So the day before we did root, and it's just these great cricketers, they don't sit like that. They're always trying to evolve and get better.
Before we move on from Stokes, you've been around a bit, Ali. You've kind of dealt with numerous England captains. How is Stokes perceived as in terms of his relationships with the written media? I mean, England's players are particularly helpful these days. I mean, they have to do any number of appearances and media appearances. And there are England captains of the past, Tony Gregg famously, who was a kind of manipulator of the media. What's the perception of Ben among the written press?
I think when he got the job, I think we probably thought it was an area of his, of the job that might not fit that comfortably with him. But actually, we've pretty much proved wrong on that. It's the same as with his cricket, really. He throws himself into things, full throttle. And in terms of dealing with the press, I think he's gone into it. He's very thoughtful about what he wants to say, the points he wants to get across. He's particularly generous with his time on tour because there are extra press conferences with him for the sort of rewards the title to invest in going out and covering cricket on tour. We did have one small kind of blow up at the start of the summer when we were talking about the Jacob Bethel, Ollie Pope kind of issue at number 3. But beyond that, I mean, he's been good to work with, and as I say, I think partly that comes down to the messaging and the consistency of messaging that him and McCullum want to get across. There's no point.
He does go back at people, doesn't he, on social media or whatever. If you think he goes back at broadcasters, for example, when broadcasters said that they're too interested in where were they, in India, weren't they? And the general view was this team's too interested in golf and they don't practice and train enough. He will jump on his social media to try and media site to try and put people right.
Yeah, well, the thing that surprised me about that was that the broadcasters were turning up at training days. So.
The Observer, Paul Hayward, excellent writer, good to see him back in print. Bazball shows signs of emerging from teenage years just in time for the challenge of the Ashes. He's talking about, I suppose, the point you just touched on, really, a slight maturity of their play. And he quotes Michael Vaughan, the Bazballers are maturing. To win a big series, you can't just play one way. The wilder impulses of Bazball haven't disappeared entirely, but a new circumspection prevails against the big-name opposition. The head has reclaimed control from the heart. Fair enough?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I think if you're going to look at the overall, I guess you want to call it a project, but I think the first couple of years of it were about possibly expanding minds and shaking off some of the kind of stresses and strains of that, really tough period during COVID and what have you. And I think the first wave of the project was about freeing minds, pushing the boundaries, showing to players how far they could take the game in terms of their aggression. And now, with a few personnel changes along the way, I think the team is now kind of, now hardening up. Ben Stokes doesn't like the word ruthless. I know we use it all the time. He hates that word. He thinks in the moment, in that split second, it is skill versus skill.
He thinks that's always also backward looking.
Exactly.
You see what happens at the end of the game, whether you've won or lost, and that kind of determines the narrative, which is a little bit how we work as sports writers, isn't it? But it's not necessarily how the game is played sometimes.
No, and players themselves these days like to talk a lot about process and stuff, don't they? And not outcome. And England spoke a lot about taking the result out of the equation and things like that, and it all sounded strange language to us and fans. But I think Ali's right in that was all part of showing them what was possible, showing them how good they could be on their day. And then now the rhetoric changed at the start of this summer. It was very clear. It actually changed at the start of last summer as well when they made the big personnel changes, but they gave them a year to kind of bed in those players, Atkinson, Smith, those kind of new guys, Cass, and they did that very well. And now it's about being a bit more ruthless.
Also in the Observer, quite an interesting piece from the stats guy, Andy Zaltzman, and he's talking about this run that Root has had against India at home now. Since 2018, he's scored 700s in the last 10 tests against India at home. And that's a run matched only by Gavaskar in the Caribbean and Bradman in England. But he makes the point, in that run, Nas, Jadeja has bowled 461 balls at Joe Root. And when he got him stumped yesterday, that's the only time he's got him out. Now, India, they construct their side really around Jadoo a bit because they like the depth that he brings to their batting. But the point here is that it's meant that Ashwin didn't bowl a lot at Root previously, and of course Kuldeep Yadav hasn't bowled a lot at Root and England here. Have they got their selections wrong?
Well, not in the case of Jadeja.
No,
it shows the excellence of Root for a start, how well he's played Jadeja, and it shows Jadeja in India and the subcontinent is a different type of cricketer. In India, he's predominantly a bowler who gives you useful runs down the order. In England, he's predominantly a number 6 who's very consistent, as he is in this series, gets you a lot of runs and won't be as effective. Now, my point with the Indian side is that they are picking all-rounders that they don't really trust. Shardul Thakur has hardly bowled, so the captain doesn't trust his bowling. And I think this is your point. So you might as well either play an out-and-out batter that you do trust to get you runs, Karen Nair could play, or you play someone who's going to get you 2-1 down, you play someone who's going to try and get you 20 wickets in Kuldeep Yadav on a ground that bounces and turns and offers something for a wrist spinner. I think their coach, Gautam Gambhir, he likes a lot of batting depth, and they can't quite work out what to, and that's, again, going back to Stokes, the value of Stokes. If you have him as a genuine fourth bowler, England can do whatever they like, and you look at their depth to batting, but it's not taking away from their bowling. India can't manage to do that.
When is he going to overtake Sachin Tendulkar?
Well, people have been crunching the numbers, haven't they? What do we, I mean, 27 Ashes would be nice.
Yeah, but don't England go to India just after that as well, early 28?
February 28.
Yeah, some people
in
think...
Mumbai.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure there won't be a Mumbai Test in that series. It would be my prediction. But yeah, about then is, I think, the way he's tracking the kind of 85 to 90 runs a game that he accumulates now. I think that's when it's thought.
Will it be like Gower handing Lara his bat out and he walked out in Antigua? Sachin there with Root's bat or something.
There's actually an interesting challenge, though, for Root. Everyone talks about scoring an Ashes 100 in Australia this winter as being his greatest challenge. No England batsman has scored 100 after the age of 36 since you. So England players, because they play so much Test cricket, they burn out early. You look at Alistair
So it's not
Cook.
a given, you're saying?
I think he will have to go. There's another challenge, I think, that people aren't necessarily taking into account, that it's not a given that his mind and his body will allow him to do that because they played so much cricket.
Yeah, and also, people talk about England playing such a high volume of Test cricket that gives the player the canvas to do it. But there is a flip side to that, which is the intensity of that Test cricket. So it's tricky with miles on the clock, but he wears it so lightly. And actually, I think it's borne out by the fact you've seen, 1,300 since losing the captaincy.
Yeah.
That really tells you something about the man there, that he's not an introverted, insular kind of player. It's about what can I bring to the team on every given day.
I'm talking of the maturity of Bazball. I guess he typifies that because he's kind of put away the ramps and the reverse scoops,
Yeah, I think he averages about 70 since Shieldberry called it the worst shot in English cricket history.
Well, we're going to look at Shields' piece because Kevin Peterson, on the back of what Root's been doing, really said, don't shout at me, but batting these days is way easier than 20, 25 years ago. I mean, I guess we all kind of slightly have a back in my day mentality, but it's important not to. And I just wanted to look at the rankings, actually, because Shield basically says he disagrees with that. Those are the current rankings with Jasprit Bumrah on top. If we go back 20 years ago, it's a pretty tasty list with McGrath up there and Muralitharan and Warne, Andre Nell down at number 10. Let's go back 30 years ago to 1995. Ambrose, Wakar Younis, Ian Bishop, Courtney Walsh, and go back right back to 1980. The interesting thing here is that there are no spinners at all, but there are a lot of very good fast bowlers. Now, the broad thrust of Shields' piece is that he thinks Peterson's half right, that the standard of fast bowling 20 years ago is as good now as it was 20 years ago, but the standard of spin is not as good as it was there, in particular wrist spin, Will.
Yeah, there's very little wrist spin around the world at the moment, isn't there? You know, Kuldeep Yadav can't get a game outside India at the moment for India. Shields watched, he's covering his 500th England Test to great fanfare at the Telegraph at the moment. So
has he done 500 tests? I hadn't heard.
He hasn't mentioned it, no. It's 2 cakes now, I think we've had. But yeah, so he has seen a lot. And one thing about Shields is he doesn't tend to think things were better back in the day.
It's important if you're going to stay in the game to have that attitude, I think.
Yeah, I mean, Peterson's theory is good for you guys, isn't it? In terms of your.
We agree with him.
I think you look at the list now, and it's incredibly Australian heavy, isn't it? There's 5 Australians in the top 10, I think. And I tend to think as well that things get better over time. I think I'd ask why there were so few draws now. Yeah. Bowlers are taking a lot of wickets. So there's DRS to contend with now, which wasn't the case 30 years ago, not all 20 years ago.
It's another reason it's a run fest this summer, because the wickets are excellent. There's only one bowler in that top 10, Jasprit Bumrah, that's playing in the series. I think there's 5 or 6 batters in the top 10. It's that old saying, isn't it? The older I get, the better I was. But I actually think the modern cricketer, we take the mick, but we admire so much of what the modern cricketer does nowadays.
We've not got long left, but Pring in the cricket paper, Dawson's return poses questions for the Ashes. Ali, we've got about 30 seconds. Come Perth, who is going to be England's principal spinner for the Ashes in that 11?
I believe that it will be Shoaib Bashir. And the reason why I say that is just mainly because of the history of left-arm spin in Australia. I think Bert Ironmonger's got 74 wickets. After that, it's Alan Border amongst Australians with left-arm finger spin. The pitches are hard in the middle. I think we're looking at Mitchell Stark's footmarks and the overspin with an off-spinner, which in itself is a gamble because he is still a raw cricketer compared to a seasoned pro like Liam.
OK. It's a big day for Liam Dawson ahead, actually, because England need those 8 wickets. Looking back at yesterday, it was the captains of both teams who were centre stage.